Chof Amud Aleph will begin Daf Yutes Amud Beis. This is the third line after the Gemara begins. The Gemara begins towards the end of the Amud, the third line after the two dots. They try to keep the Kohen Gadol awake. He shouldn't sleep Yom Kippur night. And if they see that he's getting drowsy, they tell him in order to dispel his drowsiness, they tell him that do once on the floor. So he said that stand up, dispel your tiredness by doing once on the floor. Hafeg achas. So what is the lashon of achas? Once. Meaning we darshan the achas to mean Amar Rav Yitzchak al chadas, something new, something unique, something special. Mahi, what is this unique procedure? Amrile achve kida. They said to him, demonstrate to us kida. Kida is bowing down, having the face touch the floor, and just suspending oneself with one's thumbs. This is considered one of the most difficult procedures in the Beis HaMikdash. So they said to him, to try to keep him up, they said, demonstrate to us kida. And they would keep him occupied until the time of the shlit, until the time to start the avodah on Yom Kippur. We learn the brisa, they didn't use musical instruments, not a lyre or a harp, to keep him up, but they would sing with him with their mouth. And what would they say to him? They said, if Hashem won't build a house, then the ones who labor on it will labor in vain. Meaning that the kiyum of the Beis HaMikdash is the Ashros HaShechina. And the avodah therefore has to be L'Shem Shamayim. So they'd sing this mizmor, this kapitel, in order to remind him that his avodah, that the avodah that he's going to do tomorrow has to be L'Shem Shamayim. Mekir Yerushalayim lo yushen kol halayla. The Choshev people in Yerushalayim, the prominent people, didn't sleep the whole night. Why is that? Kedei sheyishma Kohen Gadol kol havara. Because so the Kohen Gadol should hear the sounds of their voices, the sound of a commotion, and he won't be overcome by sleep. So they stayed up that there are people around, there's noise around, that would keep the Kohen Gadol awake. Tanya will learn the brisa of they had a minhag also in the Gevulim outside of Yerushalayim, and also had a minhag to stay awake all of Yom Kippur night, Zecher LaMikdash, Zecher for the Beis HaMikdash. And this is the basis of a minhag that they stay up all Yom Kippur night. They stay up with Tehillim and saying Shevach and Tishbochas the Rebbeinu Shalom. So they did this Zecher LaMikdash, that the Mekir Yerushalayim stayed up on the Yom Kippur night to keep the Kohen Gadol awake. However, it led to a chet, because people would stay up, and then men and women would stay up, and then it would lead to pritzas, it would lead to averas. So that's how it ended in a bad way. Amar Rabbi v'Yisrael Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Targum Nahar in Hardom. This that it says over here, some say it's referring to the Maisa that was in the Hardah, was after the Korban Abayis, not in the Maisa that was in the Hardah, that in the Gevulin that they did this Zecher LaMikdash, and a certain Maisa that was in the Hardah. The Amar Le'Eliyahu Rav Yehuda Achua de Rav Salah Chasida. Eliyahu said to Rav Yehuda, he said that Amriso Amay Lo Yasa Mashiach. People say, you always say, well, why hasn't Mashiach come yet? Well, I'll tell you why. Because today is Yom Kippur, and on this day, on Yom Kippur night, how many basulas were nivel on this day, that there was znos and pritzos, and they were boiled on Yom Kippur night? They have relations with the basulas on Yom Kippur night. And so we see that the staying up, this is where it led to, that it led to these averas. So it's referring to this Maisa. Amar Le, Rabbi Yehuda said to Eliyahu Navi, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my Amar, what does Rabbeinu Shalom say about this? Amar Le, he said, the Fesach Chatos Raives. He says that the Yetzer Hara, the Chet rests at the door. The Yetzer Hara is always there trying to cause a person to do an averis. So therefore, he's melamed chos. It's the Yetzer Hara that entices them. The Satan, my Amar, what is the Satan answer to this? Amarle, Leonovi says, Satan b'Yom Kippur, las le'reshusa, las dune. On Yom Kippur, the Satan doesn't have any right to prosecute. He doesn't have a right to be he doesn't have a right to be a kateger for Klal Yisrael. Mimai, where do we know this from? Amar Rami Bar Chama, because Hasatan, the gematria of Hasatan is Hasatan b'gematria tlas mea v'shitin v'arba havet is 364. So therefore, the Satan, the essence of the Satan is he can prosecute for 364 days. Plus mea v'shitin v'arba yami isla v'shusa lastune. He has only a right to prosecute for 364 days. The one day of the year, the solar day or year rather, is 365 days. So 1 day out of the year he does not have the right. On Yom Kippur he does not have reshus to prosecute. Dr. Mishnah. So now we're talking about the beginning of the avodah on Yom Kippur. So the avodah starts even before we shecht the korban. Even before that starts, there is first the trumas hadeshen, that is removing some ash from the mizbeach, removing it and bringing it down to the floor of the azara on the east side of the kevish. The kevish is on the south. This is on the east side of the kevish, meaning in the south area of the azara. And removing it from the mizbeach and putting it on the floor of the azara in that location. So Zok the Mishnah b'chol yom tarm minas mizbeach. Every day, generally speaking, every day during the year, they did the trumas hamizbeach b'kriyas hagever oisamachlo. It means at the time of the kriyas hagever, at that time, or samachloi thereabouts, ben lefana ben la'achar, either before it or after. Kriyas hagever, as we'll see in the Gemara, either means the calling of a gever, a calling of a man. Either means the calling of a rooster, or rooster zachar, therefore it's called gever, or it means that the calling out of the person who cried out and called out that it's time to start the avodah. Then when he called out and he proclaimed that. So the Trumas Hadeshen was done around about that time, either at that time or before it or after it. That's generally speaking during the year. But on Yom Kippur there was so much to do, and the Kohen Gadol did all the avodah. It wasn't divided up by the other Kohanim, so they started much earlier. So on Yom Kippur, they did the Trumas Hadeshen right after Chatzos, right after midnight. Over Regalim, Ashmor Rishona, and the Regalim they started after the Ashmora Rishona. And from the end of the first Ashmor, the night is divided up into the Machlekes Masechtas Brachos into 3 Ashmoras, so 4 Ashmoras. So if it's divided into 3 Ashmoras, it's a third of the night. So on the Regalim, that it took place much earlier because as we'll see in the Gemara, because of all that was required to do on the Regalim, and the Gemara will detail why by Regalim it's even more than Yom Kippur. So by the Regalim it started not after midnight, it started after the Ashmor Rishon, after a third of the night. And on the Yom Tovim, on the Regalim, by the time it came to the Kriyas Gever, the Azar was already filled with Yisrael, with Yidden. The Yidden came to bring their korbanos on the Regalim. It was already filled with Yisrael to be in line to be able to be makar of their korbanos for the Yom Tov. So like the Gemara Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah Zochim, Eivarim shepokim al gabi mizbeach, if there were Eivarim that burst from on top of the mizbeach. So because of the heat, it burst and flew off the mizbeach. So kain chatzos, if this happened before chatzos, yachs put it back on the mizbeach to be burnt, and they're still considered to be the Avorim that have to be burnt on the Mizbeach, they're still considered to be Kodshei Hashem. If a person had Hana from it, if he took personal benefit from it, then he's over Me'ilah. He's over the Isser of Milah, so it's Ma'olah B'hem. So therefore, before Chatzos, we say that it's not automatically considered to be consumed. Now, what do we mean over here? The Gemara in Zavachim qualifies it. It means as follows. If it was on the Mizbeach and it was completely consumed and it turned into ash, then it's already ash. There's no reason to put it on the Mizbeach. It's not called Kodshei Hashem. It's already been turned to ashes. If it is not, if it's meat and it's raw meat, and therefore it doesn't make a difference if it was before Chatzos or after Chatzos, you must put it back on the Mizbeach. It belongs on the Mizbeach. What we're talking about over here is that it was already hardened. It didn't turn into ash, but it was already hardened. Then we say, if it was before Chatzos, it still has to be, the din is that it still should be burnt on the Mizbeach. So it has to be returned to the Mizbeach and Mo'olam B'hem. But if it's la'achar Chatzos, if it was propelled off the Mizbeach after Chatzos, lo yachzer, he doesn't have to return to the Mizbeach. It's already considered to be consumed. Vein Mo'olam B'hem, there's no din me'ilah. So where do we know this from? Amar Rav, the pasuk says, the pasuk says, Hi ha'ola al moita al mizbeach kol halayla. It doesn't actually say hikter, but it says that Hi ha'ola al moita, which means it's on the flame, al mizbeach kol halayla. So which implies that it has to be burnt the entire night. Kol halayla. It has to be burnt the entire night. And then, but another pasuk says, "Because of echad oimer kol halayla v'heirin." But then another pasuk says, "Hi ha'ola al moita al mizbeach kol halayla raboiker." And then it continues and says, "Olav v'akayin midoy bad," and it says v'heir mesadesh, which implies that the entire night, is for the trumas hadesh, is for removing the ashes. So the first pasuk is mashma that the Avorim have to be on the Mizbeach the whole night. The second pasuk is mashma that if it was burnt, then it's already considered ash, and you already can do Trumas Hadesh. HaKetzad, so how do we reconcile this? Chalkeu, split up the night. Chalkeu, Chetziv Laktar, Chetziv La'aroma. First is for Haktar. Meaning, so again, these limbs that have been hardened, they haven't been turned into ash, but they're not meat either. It's not raw meat. It's hardened limbs. So chalkeo, chetziv laktar, up until chatzos, it has to be burnt on the mizbeach, and even if it flew off the mizbeach, you have to return it. After chatzos, la aroma, it's suitable for haroma. The Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, Rashi learns that you can actually do the Trumas Hadeshin with it. Tosfos says it doesn't mean you can actually do the Trumas Hadeshin. I mean, it's haroma, meaning to say that it's not in the category of Haktara. It doesn't have to be burnt on the Mizbeach anymore. It's out of the category of Haktara. So that's how we dash reconcile the psukim. Moshe Rav Kahana, I'll ask you a kasha from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, B'chol Yom Tarminas Mizbeach. It says that every day, generally, they did the Trumas Hadeshin, B'kriyas HaGever, Samach Loi, at the time of the Kriyas of HaGever, Ben Melfana, Ben Malacha. Whether it's either right before or after. Over Yom Kippur Mechatzos. On Yom Kippur it was Chatzos. Regalim Mashma Rishona, and Regalim is from the first division of the night. From after the third section, after a third of the night has passed. After the first section, after a third of the night has passed. Now, if you're telling me that this din of the Trumas Hadeshin, that it says that it's after Chatzos, is a deraisa that we say Chalkeo, that the first half of the night is up until midnight is for Haktorah. After midnight is for Trumas Hadeshin. Well, therefore, that would be teaching us that the first part of the night, up until midnight, is not for Trumas Hadeshin. You can't do Trumas Hadeshin. It's for Haktorah. Heicha mikadmina. How can we on the Yom Tovim make it earlier than Chatzos? How can we do it from the Ashmor Rishona? If the din of Chatzos is deraisa, how on Yom Tovim, even though practically speaking there's a necessity, but how can we do it before Chatzos? Rashi is not gairs heicha mekadmina vehecha ma'achrinan. Only heicha mekadminan. Tais is gairs heicha ma'achrinan, and the kasha is not only how can we make it earlier in Yom Tovim, but how can we make it later? Why do we say that generally speaking is from the time of the rooster calling is from Kriyas HaGever? Why should we make it later? Meaning, what's the kasha? Taisus explains, because if the mitzvah is from Chatzos, then we should say that Zrizim Makdimin, we should do it early as possible. Why should we say that it's later, that we should do it later from Kriyas HaGever? So, Al Koponim, so l'chayr, that's not the drush. We don't darshan it that way, that the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshin starts from Chatzos, that it only starts from Chatzos. That's not the limit over here. Elamar Rav Yochanan, he says as follows. Mimash Mishanemar Kol HaLayla, from the fact that it says Kol HaLayla, Einu Yodea Shehu Ad Baiker, the pasuk says, "Hiya oila ma'iktal mizbeach kol halayla." So it says it's oila. It's on the fire on the mizbeach kol halayla. It says until the morning advaiker. So it says the whole night. If it's the whole night, I know that means until the morning. So mimash never kol halayla any yudeshu advaiker. Umal talmud leimer advaiker. So why does the Torah say the whole night until the morning? Why does it say that? Elamai tein baiker lebaiker shalayla. It means put another morning to the morning which is at the end of the night. The morning, the normal morning, the regular morning is at the end of the night. And now it says another morning. It says Kol HaLayla, Ad Baiker, there's another morning. So that means he apply another end of the night, which is logically is Chatzos. So there's one end of the night, which is a Chatzos, and then there's the end of the entire night, which is in the morning, Alaysa Shachar. So Hilkach. B'chol Yom, we say, Terminus Mizbeach, B'kriyas HaGever, Samach Loi, Ben Melafana, Ben Melachra, Sagi. So generally we're saying that we're Terminus Mizbeach at the Kriyas HaGever, or Samach Loi, Ben before or after, because you don't need to do anymore. There's enough time, with the amount of korbanos that are there, there's enough time to start at that time. But on Yom Kippur, we have to worry about the Kohen Gadol getting weak because he does everything himself. So we say that we started earlier. So Avdin Men Chatzos, we started from Chatzos, and that gives him some time to rest afterwards and rest before he has to do some of the other avodas. Over Regolim, on the Regolim, then Afisha Yisrael and Afisha Karbonos, where there's so many Yidden, so many Karbonos, Avdin Men Meshura Rishona, we do it at the end of the first Ashmira. We do it over there in order that they should be able to get organized for all of the avodah, the volume of the karbonos that they have to be makriv. Kirtanit taima, like it says in the Mishnah, loy haisa kriyas hagever magas ad shaisa zera azar malay Yisrael. It says the kriyas hagever, by the time the kriyas hagever came, the azar was already filled with yidden. There was already filled with yidden that came to bring their karbonos. So therefore, as follows: the din of Trumas Hadeshin is not a din by as chatzos. It doesn't have to be. The din of Chatzos is to teach you that Tein Baiker LeBaiker shall Tein Baiker LeBaiker shall Laila, add another Baiker to teach you that the Ivorim that are on Mizbeach are burnt until the earlier Baiker. Meaning, if it's ash, it's turned into ash, there's no need to put it back on the Mizbeach. If it's raw meat, it must be put on the Mizbeach. But if it's hardened limbs, Tein Baiker, add an earlier morning, LeBaiker Shalayla, and therefore it's deemed to be the end of the night, the end of the burning period, until Chatzos. Until Chatzos, then if it's a limb that fell off the Mizbeach, you have to put it back and to burn it over there. If it's a hardened limb that fell off the Mizbeach after Chatzos, it doesn't have to be put on. That's the limud that we're saying. But it's not a limud for the Trumas Hadeshin. It's not teaching you the Trumas Hadeshin, it's teaching you this din about the Ivarim Shepalkam al Mizbeach. Therefore, we say that regularly, generally during the year, there was no need to do the Trumas Hadeshin earlier than the Kriyas HaGever. On Yom Kippur, the Chulsh of the Kohen Gadol, because we needed time for the Kohen Gadol, we had to give him time to rest. We started by Chatzos. By Yom Tovim, where Rashi explains there's so much ash on the Mizbeach because of the volume of the Korbanos. And also we had to set up the Maroch, and we had to set it up, and it all had to be ready so that Mamish, at the first opportunity, they could start the Akrav of the Korbanos. Because of the volume of Korbanos, they did the Trumas Hadeshin, they did it earlier, they did it by the Sefer Shmor Rishayna. Taisei Shalom explains a little different. He says because since the volume of people that came, as the Mishnah explains, the Azor was already Malay Yisrael by the Kriyas HaGever, in order to do the Trumas Hadeshin and to be able to move around in the Azora and to do whatever they had to do and to be ready for the Hakrava, they started earlier before the Azor became packed with people and was difficult to move and to get organized.